Ashok with the Realtor Lender Committee. Just want to let you know we'll be starting in a few minutes, and thank you for your participation.
And you're on air, going.
What do you have to do? Oh, we're okay.
You're okay.
Yeah. Good morning. This is Ashok with the Realtor Lender Committee here at the Board of Realtors. And along with me is Greg Ambergy. He's a new member to our committee, and we're very excited to have him because he brings a new perspective on all issues that relate to the real estate market. And we put together this webinar because it's timely, and we've had a lot of questions about what do you do when the purchase price exceeds the list price. Before we go into the main presentations, I would just like to give you an idea of how you can ask us questions. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. Greg, will you just talk a little bit about your experience as an appraiser? And here we go. Okay. For you to be able to ask questions, you can do it in 3 different ways. And you can either do it on the screen, or you can text either Greg at 513-295-7133 or myself, Ashok, at 513-600-4961. And before I ask Greg to start his presentation, I would just like him to talk a little bit about why we even decided to do this webinar.
Well, we've been in a buyer's market for a long time now, since the real estate market started kind of going south. And for the first time in a long time, we're in what might be considered a seller's market, where a seller puts a house on the market and within 30 days that thing is sold. And so we're starting to see situations where something happens to cause the actual purchase price of the house to be higher than the list price. Well, that presents a problem for the lender. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to deal with that when it comes up. I'll tell you about my experience. At first, I've been appraising real estate since the late 90s, and I'm certified as a residential appraiser in Ohio and Kentucky. I worked the northern 3 counties of Kentucky and about 5 counties in Ohio. So when these things come up, we have to explain them to a lender, and usually if there's a good explanation, there's not a problem, and things sail right through. If there's not an explanation, it's going to send up big-time red flags for the lender, and it could put your deal in jeopardy and call into question the accuracy of our appraisal.
So if I was to kind of summarize what our purpose here today is, it is for you to give a little bit of guidance to the realtors on what type of things they can do to help both you and the lender present it for underwriting so that there are no issues at the time of getting it approved.
Exactly.
That's all right.
And it's best by far if all that stuff happens right up front. If the underwriter has to come back and ask a question later because something hasn't been explained right, it's sort of a downward spiral. You want it to all go through the first time if possible. So it's good to get that information to the appraiser.
So just go ahead and maybe walk us through your presentation and see.
As appraisers, we are concerned with market value. That's the primary thing that we're concerned with when we're presenting an appraisal to a lender. And the definition that we use that's actually in our appraisal reports is, this is the definition of market value: the most probable price which a property should bring in a competitive and open market under all conditions requisite to a fair sale. The buyer and seller each acting prudently, knowledgeably, and assuming the price is not affected by undue stimulus. Now, that a lot of that says what we're trying to say here is that market value has to have informed buyers, informed sellers that are acting in their best interest. And then undue stimulus is another thing that can affect a purchase price. And so we're supposed to kind of weed that out and say, if this undue stimulus didn't exist, what would be the market value of this property? Go on to the next slide there. Okay, this never happens. A home is listed at $199,000 and a buyer just decides, you know what, this seller, they were so nice, I'm just going to pay them $203.
You're right.
That never happens. But we do see situations all the time where a house is listed for $199,900 and the sale price is $202 or $203. And so what we have to figure out, what caused that to happen, and was it stimulus that has nothing to do with market value, or was it the market driving that price up to $203?
Greg, I have a question. If we go back to this earlier slide,
yes,
if you don't mind. So what you are saying is that the role of the appraiser is, apart from the comparables and things like that, which are the obvious indication of a value, you have some discretion on saying that this price could be higher or lower based on other consideration than just pure comparables.
Yes. Again, we're looking at, if you take a typical buyer and a typical seller, and they're motivated properly, and there's time when the house is on the market for a reasonable amount of time, what is the most probable price that a typical buyer and a typical seller would come up with? That's our concern. Now, obviously, a lot of times a house doesn't sell for its most probable price. That's why it's pretty rare for the appraised price to come in exactly on the purchase price. You know, it may be $2,000 or $3,000 higher, maybe a little bit lower. It may be way off, but what we're looking for is the most probable price for a typical buyer and a typical seller.
Okay.
Now, there are some reasons why these over list price sales happen. Some are legitimate, some are not. Here's some reasons that this could happen. Multiple offers. This is the most likely scenario and the one we're going to deal with the most today. You've got 3 different people that love this house, and there's 3 contracts on it. One may be for $200,000. The list price might be $199,000, and some other people know there's an offer going in, and they say, well, we're going to bid $203,000. We're going to put, and then the seller will look at not just the purchase price, but they'll look at the strength of the buyer. They'll look at the strength of the contract, how quick they can close, how much money they're putting down, what kind of financing are they getting, and they'll look at those 3 offers and say, this is the strongest one. It may or may not be the one with the highest price, but it probably will be.
So in this case, you're talking about competition.
Competition drives a price up. It's simple market economics. When there are less goods and services and more money chasing them, the price goes up. When there's a glut of goods and there's less money, the price goes down. That's just simple market economics. Now, you can also have excessive closing costs built into a sale. That used to happen a long time ago. It's not happening very much anymore. We don't see that very much.
But on that point, most of the lenders' guidelines restrict what the maximum amount of a selling concession is.
Yes.
So if the closing price costs that are being paid for are limited by what the guidance or the guidelines will allow.
And generally, what are you seeing? $2,000-$3,000, maybe $3,500.
Well, it's more like the percentage. So it's generally speaking, you want it to be, or you see it around 3%. FHA will go up to 6%. VA goes to 4%. So, and conventional, anything above 95%, you can only go a maximum of 3%.
And if those closing costs are not excessive for the market, then it's not really a problem. Okay. And generally, we're seeing pretty low, reasonable closing costs built into a sale. Now, if you've got personal property, like you're out in the country and a guy's got a $10,000 John Deere lawnmower and he's going to sell it as part of the sale, that may be affecting the sale price. If you've got a house that's listed and maybe it needs new carpet, and the buyer comes in and says, you know, thing's listed at $100,000, but I'll give you $103 for it, but you have to put new carpet in before the closing. That will happen. HUD properties, we've seen this recently. If you get a low appraisal on a HUD property when it first goes on the market, that has to be the list price that the house is listed at. So you may have a lender-owned property that is listed at $25,000, and you have several people bidding on it, and it sells for $40,000. We're seeing that all the time. That's another reason you can have one of these situations.
Greg, we're going to
yes.
come back and talk a little bit more about this, right? We'll
yes.
go ahead and
yes.
cover some of this material and come back to it.
If there are special conditions in the contract, maybe a buyer says, you know what, if you can close this house in 10 days and get out, because I need a place to live, if you can close in 10 days, we'll give you $3,000 more. We see those kinds of things. Every now and then you might have a commission issue that results in a change in the price, especially if you have a for sale by owner house or something like that. If you've got a property, let's say the seller really wanted to the seller wanted to get rid of the house in a hurry, and they tell the realtor, I know this thing's worth $115, listed at $100 because I need to sell it in 30 days. And then you start to see multiple showings on the same day, and everybody gets nervous and bids the price up. Those are the things that happen.
But you would have to think that the majority of the issues about the price, the purchase price being higher than the list price, is because of the competitive aspect of it.
Yes.
Generally speaking,
that's the legitimate.
Issue.
Yes, that's the legitimate reasons that a lender will accept. When the lender sees this, because we have to, in the contract, we have to put all this information about the list price, and then we or in the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, we put information about the list price, and we have to read the contract and put all the information about the contract in there. So if the lender sees that the sale price is higher than the list price, they know this happens sometimes. They need an explanation from us. And so this is very important. If you are the listing agent, not the buyer's agent, but the listing agent, it's very important that you communicate this information to the appraiser, because a lot of times the selling agent may not have all the information. They may know that there were multiple offers, but they don't know if there were 2 or 3, or they don't know what the circumstances were. The listing agent has all this information, and that agent is responsible to communicate that to the appraiser.
So this goes back to the point that you were mentioning, that it is better to have all this information up front to the appraiser.
Yes.
So that in this particular case, where the obvious issue is going to be why is the purchase price higher, you are able to put together all that information up front, and then you don't have to have issues later from the underwriting department.
Right. And there may be some appraisers who don't catch it right off the bat. Like sometimes I'll look at the contract very late in the appraisal process, and I may not notice what the contract price is until I'm nearly complete with the appraisal, or I've done all my market information, and it's 8 o'clock at night, and I'm wanting to finish this appraisal, my report, and then I notice that the contract price is higher than the list price, and I need an explanation. It's better if I have that information up front. So it's great if the listing agent is proactive.
Yeah, and I think from we've had situations, and almost all loan lenders have this situation, and there are no problems in getting it done if the appraisal is done properly right from the start. Issues only come in if it's not done properly the first time around. Would you say?
Yeah, and again, the appraiser is concerned with market value. So chances are, if there really are 3 different buyers in competition for this purchase price, the comps are going to be out there, because the market is saying, wow, there's 3 people that want to pay this much for this house. That's pretty much defining what the market value is.
Nice.
again, we put in all the information about the listing, anything from the last 12 months, even expired listings or withdrawn listings, and if a listing is older than a year, if it's relevant to what's going on now, we put that information in. We have to put in specific information about the contract. Who are the parties? What are the dates? The price? Was their personal property like appliances or things like that included in the sale? Any financial assistance has to be disclosed. If you're giving $3,000 for closing costs and that's in the contract, that's disclosed to the lender. And then the lender wants to know, is this an arm's length sale? And it might be an estate sale, it might be an REO sale or a lender sale. It could be a sale between family members, but we have to specifically say what kind of sale this is. Obviously, a lender and a typical sale is an arm's length transaction where the buyer and seller don't really know each other and they're acting in their own best interest.
But these are standard requirements on all appraisals.
All appraisals, yes.
All appraisals require this basic information.
On a purchase, yes. Now, here's what we suggest. If you are the listing realtor and you've got a special situation like this, it's very important that you either have some notes so that when the appraiser calls to schedule the appointment, that information is going to get to him, or you might even say appraisals must be scheduled with the listing agent. As a matter of the way I do business, I try to talk to the listing agent on every purchase I have, just because there's information that they have that may not be on the MLS sheet that I need. And so, but I know all appraisers don't do that. Be prepared up front to give a good explanation to the appraiser of what happened to drive this price up.
Greg, there is a misconception out there among the realtors that they cannot talk or should not talk with the appraiser. Will you please address that? Because
Yes.
it's kind of important that they know what they can do and what they cannot do.
Well, the new Dodd-Frank rules and some other recently some rules were put into place to sort of create a firewall between the appraiser and anybody that has a financial interest in the transaction. And what they said is, we don't want anybody with a financial interest in a transaction, namely a realtor, maybe a loan officer, to have undue influence over an appraiser. So you can talk to me all day long. You can give me facts. You can tell me anything I need to know about that property. What you cannot do is tell me how to interpret those facts. You can tell me, this house next door, it ended up, I've heard realtors say, I took my buyer through that house and it was just terrible. And I may not see that because maybe there's only one MLS photo or something. But that's information that's a fact, or it's relevant to the situation. Now, you can't tell me, you can't say, therefore my house is worth $15,000 more.
Right.
But you can give me all the facts you want. There is no rule that keeps a realtor from talking to an appraiser. You just aren't allowed to have influence over what is my final value, my opinions about this house. I always tell realtors, avoid the temptation to supply comps. I know I usually politely accept them and then sort of discard the information because I have all the information you have. I have MLS. I have the ability to call any realtor and ask them questions about a house. And also I might be under certain guidelines from my lender as to what they want to see in comparables. So I'm probably not going to pick exactly the same ones you did, and it's just since it's the most important part of our job, it's a little bit presumptuous for you to try to do that for us.
So coming back to this, you would like to know what is special about that property.
What is special, or what is the reason the big thing is, what is the reason it sold for more than it was listed for?
Okay.
That's the most important information because I have to supply that to the lender or the sale's probably dead on arrival.
Now, this may be an unfair question, but if you see a listing price of a certain amount and then a purchase price which is higher than that, is your inclination to try and find the value at the purchase price, or what's your thinking at that point?
No, I'm trying to find the market value. I'm trying to find that most probable price that an informed buyer and an informed seller acting in their own best interest would come up with. So generally, I'm doing most of my market research before I even see what the sale price is.
Okay.
Because I want to see if what I'm getting is in line with the market price. Now, a lot of appraisers might do it differently and get that information. I generally do most of my appraisal before I read the contract. It keeps me honest. It keeps me looking at market value.
And so you maintain your perspective that way.
Yes.
Is this the last one?
Yeah, the bottom line is this. If the comparable sales in the neighborhood support your sale price, the appraisal shouldn't be a problem because, again, we're looking for market value. We're not looking to hit that sale price. We just have to have a valid explanation for the lender, explain the situation, and believe me, they understand right now that in a lot of parts of the country we're in a seller's market and that you're seeing this a lot. I'm talking to a lot of my appraiser friends. They're seeing this, 2 or 3 times a month sometimes, where, and so the lenders know it's coming. We just have to explain it. So it's good that the listing agent get that information to the appraiser in some way.
So a part of our summary here, Greg, is that it's not unusual now to see purchase price being above the listing price.
Correct.
And then it's not that difficult for you to justify it if there is a reason for it.
If there's a reason for it.
And
yes.
if that happens, then the underwriters and the lenders should accept it, and that should not be a major issue.
Right.
One last question I will ask, and this is more from the lending side. Your role as an appraiser is to do the market value. How much of your emphasis is, like, how distinct is your report, say, from an inspection? Where do you spot things that...
A home inspector is looking at in much greater detail than an appraiser. Now, on an FHA inspection, I'm looking at certain specific things. I'm looking for, a pressure release valve on a water heater. I'm looking up in the attic to see if there's any damage. A home inspector is gonna put a microscope on the house. An appraiser is not. We're looking for apparent defects in the house, and if it's not something that jumps out at us, we're not going to see it because generally we're not in there nearly as long as a home inspector.
So that's not your role.
That's not our role. Our role is to find, if there's a foundation problem or something like that that's obvious, we're going to see that. But we're not putting a microscope on the house like a home inspector is.
At this point, we'll open the forum here for questions. And if you don't mind, like I said, we do have sometimes problems getting to the questions. So you can either text them to Greg or myself or ask them here. And while you're doing these questions, there is one I have in mind. Greg, you mentioned about a HUD property which had a value of like $25,000 based on the FHA appraisal, but then it sold. The purchase price was around $45,000. Was there some particular interaction you had with the realtor at that point that helped you make that case for the?
Yes, there was. They had brought in an out-of-town. HUD had brought in an out-of-town appraiser to do a whole bunch of properties. Sometimes they'll do 10 or 15 at one time. And he just really, I saw the original HUD appraisal, and it just wasn't, very comprehensive work. This house was larger and had a lot more features than most of the houses in the neighborhood, and he just appraised it too low. So, but whatever that HUD appraised value is, which happened to be $25,000 here, that's the liquidation value they're looking for. That has to be the list price. So the realtor listed it for $25,000. Well, as soon as it went on the market, investors were all looking at this thing going, oh man, I could fix this house up and sell it for 100. So they began putting their bids in, and the one that won was at 40 or 45,000, I don't remember. And so I had to explain the reason, and fortunately the listing realtor sent me a copy of the original HUD appraisal, and I saw that it just wasn't maybe the best work, and I was able to explain that to the lender, and as far as I know, everything went through beautifully.
We are still looking for some questions if you all have some more. So any other real life examples, Greg?
Back before the market tanked, we used to see all kinds of creative things going on with sales. You know, a guy would say, "Oh wow, that's a really nice Harley you got there in the garage. Why don't we just add that into the purchase price?" And they, jump the price by, $7,000. But we were in a situation where real estate values were going up so fast that may have actually flown, or there were transactions that kind of occurred under the table that the appraiser never knew about. None of that stuff is going on anymore, thankfully. It's cleaned up the market a lot, so we've seen some crazy things.
So okay, here's a question, and this is again from the realtor's perspective. This is about them being able to contact you. Are you suggesting that before the appointment is made, the listing agent call you about the property?
Well, I'm going to call them. Obviously they don't know who the appraiser is, but so I'm going to call. Probably, I usually just try to call the listing agent's cell number, but I may call the office number of the appointment center and say, hey, I want to schedule the appraisal on Maple Street for tomorrow at 5 p.m. Well, if it's just a normal sale, the agent whoever's booking the thing will just give me the lockbox code, or it might be an electronic lockbox. They'll say go and do it. It's no problem. But where it comes in is if you've got a special situation like this, you probably want to put notes on there. Don't schedule the appraisal through the appointment center. Have them call me.
Now, okay, so this is your standard practice, but there's a lot of appraisers that come in through AMCs and things like that.
Right.
Would it be the same thing for them, or is it better for the listing agent to contact the appraiser as a standard practice?
If you have a special situation, it's very important that they do that. And in my opinion, if the appraiser doesn't want to hear information like this, he or she is not doing their job, and because they have to be able to explain what's going on to a realtor or to an underwriter.
I see. There's a question here that was just texted to us. Is it possible to get copies of the materials used in this morning's presentation? I believe that should be easy enough. The other question is, have you seen more cases where seller-paid concessions are being added on top of list price? Thank you for these questions, by the way. It makes it a lot more meaningful for us.
Yes, we're not seeing seller concessions. I don't know that I'm trying to think if I've had one in the last 6 months where concessions were the main cause of the price going up. That's probably, if seller concessions are a cause of the price going up, that's probably going to set off a little bit of a red flag for the underwriter. But again, it's going to come down to, do the comparables support the sale price?
And maybe I can address that a little bit. The seller's concessions from the underwriter's point of view, again, we have those limits. You can only go 3% if the LTV is more than a certain amount. In the case of conventional loans, I believe it's 95% or more. And in the case of FHA, it's 6%, VA is 4%. So as long as people are staying within those guidelines, you're not going to get a red flag from the lender's side. The appraisal itself has to support that the market value that the appraiser assigns to it has to support the seller's concessions that are giving. And
yeah, and if you look at an appraisal on the sales comparison grid, generally we make adjustments to comparable sales based on the market's reaction to the difference between the comparable sale and the subject. Now, we have a place to make adjustments if concessions are excessive. For instance, there's a comparable sale that had 7% concessions, and which the market doesn't bear at all. we might then adjust that comparable downward and say, well, that was an inflated sale price. But in general, if it's market accepted or market driven concessions, we're not making any adjustments.
Okay, so I guess we still need to answer that question. Have you seen more cases where seller paid concessions are being added on top of it?
No. It would probably be a situation where you had, you had increased competition driving up that price. I haven't seen it myself.
So it's neither more nor less. It's just whatever it turns out to be. It's not a huge thing for you right now.
No, it's not.
Okay. Well, I think that's about all the questions we have. If you have any more questions, please. You can still contact Greg or myself, and we'd be glad to talk to you. Greg, thank you so much. And
thank you, Ashok.
We thank you again, the participants, for making this great event for us. And you know how to get in touch with us either through Annette, and the gentleman that wanted that presentation sent to them will take care of it. Thank you so much, and have a good day.